Hello, this is Ms. DB, and in this video we're going to review how to do some of the problems on the Chapter 1, Section 1 assignment called Evaluating Algebraic Expressions. So we're going to start right off using some variables, and we're going to find the value, take the value of the variable that they'll give us and plug it back in, and then do the work and see what we get. So I'm going to, you can type your answers, or you can use a drawing tool. I'll do that with some of them. Or you can print this and then do the work with your own pencil and then scan your work back in, or take a picture and scan it back in. So the work and answers is going to go below it because you can't type right on this. It's just an image of the book problems. So number 1 is x plus 4. But they tell us that x is equal to 11. They want us to find the answer for this when x is equal to 11. So I'm going to back up here, and instead of x, I'm going to put 11. So that's all you do when you're given the value of a variable, is you replace that variable with what they tell you it's equal to. So 11 plus 4, of course, is 15. So that's easy enough to do. Now number 2 looks a little bit trickier. Number 2 says 2a plus 7. And then they tell us that a is equal to 7. So I know I have to go back and replace a with 7, but then that says 27. That's not right. 2a means 2 times a. I'm going to use parentheses to show my times. If I put parentheses around one number, that's a way of saying multiplication. I also could have gone 2 times 7, and for that times sign, I used the asterisk, the star key that's on my keyboard. What I don't want to do is use the x for times, because now I'm not sure, is that a variable x or is it the multiplication sign? So there's different ways to show multiplication, but we will not use the x for multiplication anymore in algebra. So now I have 2 times 7 plus 7. And now I have to do the 2 times 7 before I add the 7. So 2 times 7 is 14 plus 7, and I'll let you finish that up and find what the answer is. Now in number 3, this one's interesting too. We have 2, and then that parentheses means times, remember. 2 times whatever 4 plus n is. But then they tell us, oh, and then there's a minus 5. I almost forgot the minus 5. Then they tell us that n is equal to 0. I always kind of like when they have n equal to 0 because it makes it kind of an easier problem to solve. So I wrote that out again. You don't have to write it out again, but I did. And then I'm going to change the n to a 0 because that's what they said n was equal to. And then don't forget that minus 5 like I did. So now what should I do first? This is kind of a lot of work to do, isn't it? I'm going to do the 4 plus 0 first because it's in the parentheses. And we'll do more work with order of operations throughout the year, but you may have remembered from a previous course something called Pemdas, which stands for, it's the first initials of please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Now that's the way I remember it anyway, but really my dear goes together because that stands for multiplication and division, but you don't have to do multiplication before division. You just do it in order from left to right. And Aunt Sally goes together. You know, that's her name. Her name is Aunt Sally, so it has to go together. And that means addition and subtraction, the A and the S. So please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. The P, oops, I'm still using green. The P is parentheses, and that means that you want to do all the work in the parentheses first. The E from excuse is exponent. So if you have any like 2 squared or 3 to the 4th power, you would do that next. And then we have the multiplication and division in order from left to right. And then we have addition and subtraction in order from left to right. That's our order of operations review. So going back up to our problem right here, we had some parentheses to do. 4 plus 0. Well, that's just 4, of course. So we put the 4 in the parentheses, and then the minus 5. So 2 times 4, let's see, should I do 2 times 4 next or the minus 5? Well, multiplication shows up in my order of operations before the subtraction. So you would do 2 times 4, and then from that answer you would subtract the 5. So again, I'll let you finish that up. All right, let's look at number 4. Number 4 says to evaluate each expression for the given values of the variables. And it's exactly the same thing as we did in 1, 2, and 3, except this time they'll give us 2 variables and then the values to use for 2 of those variables. So in number 4, we have 3x plus 2y. That means 3 times x plus 2 times y. So I'm going to get a clean spot here and then work on number 4. So number 4 says 3x plus 2y, but then they tell us that x is equal to 8. So just like before, I don't want to write 3, 8 because that would look like 38. So I'm going to use the parentheses and go 3 times 8 plus 2 times y, and y is 10. So all I did is replace x with 8 because that's what x is equal to, and I replaced y with 10 because that's what y was equal to. And when I replaced those numbers, I put them in parentheses to remember that this is multiplication. And then my order of operations, Pemdas, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, multiplication shows up before addition. So then you would do the 3 times 8 and do the 2 times 10. And then you can go ahead and add that together. And I'll let you finish that up. Now number 5 has some decimals in it, but it's nothing different than any of the other work. We'd have 1.6 times p. Oh, and then it's a minus 3 times q. So we replace the p with what p is equal to, which is 4.5. So 1.6, and then I'll use the parentheses to show multiplication and put the 4.5 in the parentheses. And then I have to subtract 3 times, the 3 times q means to multiply, and the value of q they tell us is 1.4. And I get those values from the second part of the problem where it tells us that p is 4.5 and q is 1.4. Now, I would definitely grab a calculator at this point and do 1.6 times 4.5. You can do them by hand if you like. There's a calculator on your computer that you can use that would look something like this. Let's see, 1.6 times 4.5. If you need help finding a calculator, there's online ones, or there's one that you can just get from the start menu on your computer. Or you can just use a handheld one. It does not need to be a fancy like graphing calculator or anything, just a regular calculator or a scientific calculator. If you have one of those, would be great too. Like a $10 or less calculator. Maybe they're 15 now, but nothing more than that. And that's 4.2. So I did the multiplication with my calculator for the 1.6 times 4.5 and the 3 times 1.4, and then I have to remember that I'm subtracting the answer from 1.6 times 4.5, so that was 7.2, and then I subtract the other answer. And then again, you can finish that up. Now, number 6 is a word problem, but it's not too tricky of a word problem. We just have to work out exactly what they're asking us to do. So it says if W is the number of cups of water needed to make paper mache paste, then 1/4 times W, remember when you write a number next to a variable, it's multiplication. So this means 1/4 times W can be used to find the number of cups of flour. Find the amount of flour needed for each amount of water. So in 6, 7, 8, and 9, they're giving us the amount that we will use for our W. Let me get a little more room here. So for number 6, I am going to write down what the expression was, which is 1/4 times W. And then I will just find the answer when W equals 12. So I'm going to even write that, when W equals 12. So I would take 1/4, let me move that down just a little bit. I would take 1/4 times 12 to answer number 6. Now to do fractions, you can either change the 1/4 to a decimal. That would be 0.25. 1/4 is the same as 0.25. And then times it by 12. Here, let me show you how to find the decimal version of 1/4. You would just take 1, the top number, divided by the bottom number. 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. Or you can write these as fractions. I'm going to use my pen tool now because it's hard to make fractions when you're typing. Okay, so let's say that you have 1/4 times 12. Put a 1 under your 12. A whole number can be written as a fraction if you just put 1 under it. Now the rules for fractions, when you multiply fractions, you multiply the two numbers on top. So 1 times 12 is 12. And then you multiply the two numbers on the bottom, and that's 4. And then you simplify this. What is 12 divided by 4, or 12/4? And the answer to that is 3. So for number 6, if you take 1/4 times 12, you get 3. And you would get the same thing if you did it on your calculator with 0.25 times 12. So for number 7, I'll do number 7 right here. I'm going to use the same expression, 1/4 W, except this time W is equal to 8. So I'm going to take 1/4 times 8. And I will turn my 8 into a fraction by putting it over 1. Oh yeah, the dot is the other way you use to show multiplication, but it's hard to find the dot on a keyboard. You have to insert a symbol to find it. So now to multiply fractions, you multiply the two numbers on top. 1 times 8 is 8. And you multiply the two denominators, the numbers on the bottom, and that's 4. And then you simplify 8 divided by 4 and get 2. And number 8 and number 9, you'll do the same thing. However, in 8 and 9, you will not get a nice whole number. Let me use green for number 8. You will get a fraction for an answer, or a decimal if you changed it to 0.25. So again, we start with 1.4 W, but in number 8, W equals 7. So I'd have 1/4 times 7. So change that to a fraction by putting a 1 under it, and then you get 1 times 7 is 7. 4 times 1 is 4. You can leave your answer like that, 7/4. That's the answer. Now, if you did it on a calculator, you might have got 0.25 times 7. Well, you would have. And that's 1.75. So that is also a way to leave your answer. So there's more than one way to leave your answer, and it still is correct. And then you can do number 9. Now, the second part of the worksheet is just like the part that we just did. These are the same problems that we just did, except with, different variables, different values for what the variables are equal to. But it's the same steps. In number 15 through 18, you're going to use 1/2 times, 1/2 times C rather than the 1/4 times W. And then these are the values of C. This is C equals 26. This would be C equals 12, C equals 20, and this would be C equals 34. And if you would prefer to not use fractions, you can use 1/2 is equal to, you probably know this, is 0.5. So you could multiply, you could use a calculator and multiply 0.5 times each of these. However, these are all even numbers, and you could find half of them pretty easily. You'll get nice numbers for all of those. And then the last questions on this worksheet, it seems like there's a lot of them, but these should be review questions from, past. Some of them are from this assignment. Some of them are from past courses. If you find that this is taking you too long to complete this assignment, then just do like the odd problems. So I know it might seem like it's taking too long, and if it is, just do the odds. But like 60 through 67, these are just adding, dividing, subtracting, multiplying. It's just a quick review. In number 56 through 59, these are just the odd numbers. They want you to say which one are the odds. So if you're doing the odd problems, you probably know that that's like 1, 3, 5, 7, and so on. And numbers that end with 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Okay, so let me know if you get stuck on anything. Send me a quick email, give me a call, or come to my office hours or to the ASC room. Thanks a lot and have a wonderful day.